After your high school career, you're able to go to the University of Iowa on a football scholarship. Was everyone bummed in town that you didn't become a Buckeye?
For me, it felt like the recruiting maybe happened a little bit later. The bigger schools happened a little bit later for me. Um, Junior year, I had a lot of MAC schools showing interest. I was starting to field some offers. I can't exactly remember when Iowa offered. I remember Coach O'Keefe kind of showing up periodically as I was getting towards, senior year and showing more interest. Michigan State started to show up a little bit. Purdue started to show up. Ohio State came in later. The difference was they had already brought two QBs in, like two guys that already committed. So it was one of those like, you're not going to go there. That decision was already made, before. So I was had weighed them out. I still had, great conversations with Coach Tressel and they're a top-notch program. And it's obviously in Ohio growing up, the '01 national championship game, like we had a party in our basement. That was one of my favorite seasons as a football fan, just to watch, Big Ten ball. But I think the Big Ten was the high level overview for me. I watched Big Ten football growing up every Saturday morning. That was how I prepared for my game, was to watch these guys go do battle in the Midwest. And so that was the big draw for me with Iowa. And it was, a lot of family and friends. I'll be rooting for Iowa unless you play Ohio State kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, a lot of that. But it's in everybody in Ohio is an Ohio State fan. I kind of call their bluff a little bit because it's like, well, why don't you root for Cincinnati or Ohio or Akron? It's like, well, I'm from Ohio. Root for Ohio State. There's a ton of schools in Ohio that you don't root for. So it's kind of a little bit of a bandwagon thing around here, but great program, great tradition. All those things are a part of what makes and has made the Big Ten so great. And so it still felt like going to Iowa, there was like, you're still connected to these people back here and to this, we're going to play them and it's going to be brought up in conversation. That was exciting for me. So I really liked that part of, that was the difference. I had Miami of Ohio on my radar. The MAC had just been churning out quarterbacks at this time. There was kind of this allure to being a quarterback in the MAC. You had Big Ben, you had Chad Pennington, you had a couple other guys that were on rosters in the NFL. So there was enough there to kind of be like, maybe I should go play quarterback in the MAC. Probably less of an obstacle to get on the field, but there was just this magic about the Big Ten to me, and that was the difference. And then being at Iowa, visiting there, and then shaking Kirk Ferentz's hand and kind of seeing the kind of man he was, it was like, all right, this is a no-brainer. I need to be a part of this program.
Ricky, you started 3 years at the University of Iowa. In 2008, 1,956 passing yards, 14 passing touchdowns, 9 picks. 2009, 2,417 passing yards, 17 passing touchdowns, 15 picks. In 2010, your final year, 3,004 passing yards, 25 passing touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. What was so different for you individually in 2010?
So I spent, obviously 2009, I had a bit of an interception issue. If you asked anybody, it would be, I threw a handful of pick sixes. I was like a gunslinger. I felt like I could put it in any window. Like I can get that there, and then like, snakes, like a little tighter than I thought. So I had a lot of confidence. I felt good about what I was seeing. What I came to learn, later on, 2010, 2011, was there were things missing with my footwork, things missing with my release that just other guys were doing it much better, where my skills kind of maxed out in 2010. That was the best that I could put on the field at the time. In 2011, went searching to upgrade and kind of actually downgraded. But the 2010 year, I had an assistant at Iowa. He was an offensive assistant. His name was David Rye. He had played quarterback at Iowa behind Brad Banks, and very intelligent man, understood the game very well. And he kind of sat me down in the offseason. He was like, here's a plan to watch tape. Like, I know you're watching tape and you're kind of, you're learning. You're not just watching the game like mom or aunt or uncle will watch the game, or they just watch the ball. You're starting to watch technique. You're starting to learn how to watch the game. But here's a way to kind of catalog it. and track it. And so what we did was that off season, I had this huge binder where I went through each opponent and I watched like 4 or 5 games from each opponent of the previous year. And I literally tracked every single play. Like I did the writing myself. I tracked what coverage they were in, down and distance, just went through all the things that these offensive assistants, defensive assistants are doing for the coordinators and the head coaches during the week to make sure everything's in the computer system correctly. So I did that just as a practice, just to kind of understand the game a little bit more. And it made a huge difference in how I saw the game, made a huge difference in kind of how I looked at a D coordinator. You know, I saw them, how are they trying to call this thing? Like, what is he thinking on 3rd and 3 versus 3rd and 7? And that was stuff that maybe was brought to your attention and you talked about it, but the coaches are internalizing that information in a much different way than I think the athletes are. And there's a chance there as a quarterback, though, to where you almost have to have a foot in both camps. You have to think a little bit like a coach, and you have to think a little bit like a player. You can't lose that sort of moxie and that, go for it attitude. But at the same time, you have to know the situation that you're in. And that was a big difference for me in 2009, 2010 is like, understand the situation, Rick. Look around you. You don't have to force this ball. There's an open guy here. We can take the profit and we can move the chains. And, looking back, these are things that Coach O'Keefe was always trying to tell me from 2006. I know that I'm stubborn. And so it takes a little time for me to kind of come around to these things. But I think that off-season study was a huge part of making a jump from 9 to 10. And then there was an urgency. Like, I don't want to be the guy that's in the media, like, you throw a lot of picks and that as a young man, that bothers you. So you want to work on your deficiencies. And so it was just a natural, like, work on our deficiencies. I value the fact that I am able to throw an early pick six, a crucial pick six, and bounce back. I think that goes back to what we talked about before, goldfish memory, fight adversity, all those things. Those were etched early on. And I needed those things when you're playing a Michigan or you're playing a Penn State or Wisconsin. It's not going your way. What are you going to do? Okay, you threw a pick six. Well, there's 3 quarters left. Like, are you going to be the pick six guy, or are you going to rally and bring these guys back? And so that was helpful in 2009. There was a lot to learn from those situations. And we had a great year. 2010, we didn't have as great of a year, but I found that growth, and, it was something that I've now been able to use in the coaching world. I'm now, volunteer coaching at my high school and coaching quarterbacks. And a lot of those lessons that I learned on how to watch tape, I find myself telling my kids this stuff, right now. So it was a huge help in my growth. And it's been a big step, or a huge piece in me kind of helping the younger quarterbacks understand the game a little bit better.
I love the path of your career at Iowa, because, and again, like not necessarily just going off the stats, but like understanding that like each year, like you grew a little bit more. And again, we're just talking individually, and that's so cool that it finally all clicks. And isn't it crazy how sometimes like your coach or your parent or your friend can tell you the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And then finally one day we're open to it, we listen, and then all of a sudden we're able to implement all that goodness into whatever it is that we're doing. Like, I think that to me was the coolest part about just listening to what you had to say about that season, and how you're like, yeah, he pulled me aside, and, we really kind of dove in, and I was open to it. And then here we go.
Yeah. I think sometimes you just have to hear it from a different angle, or, I know you work with high school kids now, and I think there's a certain age where it's like, dad can tell me nothing. And then you get to a point where you're like, damn, dad knew everything. Like, I've gone through that phase. And when I was in high school and college, I was like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And then, like, you get older, you have your own kids, and you're like, okay, he was right. It's like, he was right. And I just think that's part of it. I think being stubborn and not listening is part of learning how to be a good listener, and kind of seeing both sides of the coin. So it's a growth process. Like I told you before we hit record, I could not see the field with a telescope as a freshman. I mean, there was no chance. Like, and if you would have told me my freshman year that I was going to start for 3 years at this place, there's no way. So, like, I say that only to, if there's anybody listening that is in a point where they're like, they think that it can't turn around. It can. Like, it really can. And it's crazy, because I had the same thing happen to me when I was in high school at Lake Catholic. I remember being in my dad's office my sophomore year, and I'd be like, Dad, I'm not going to play college football. I'm not. Like, it's just not going to work out for me. I'm more of a basketball player. I'm going to take that route. Senior year, I'm going to Iowa to play football. Like, it's just, so much changes. And I think you're so emotional as a young kid. You're not mature enough yet. I laugh with my friends about it. You think, you're a senior in college, or even your rookie year, your second year in the NFL. Oh, I'm mature. You don't know anything. Like, even that second year in the NFL, you have no clue about life. You haven't really been thrust into the real world in any way, shape, or form. You haven't started a family. You don't have any kids yet. You don't even own a home. Like, you don't know land. You're just not anywhere. And you think you're somewhere. But there's a lot to learn from that. And what I've realized is that, thank goodness that I had a father that maybe it was just programming, that I'm just saying what he's saying. I hadn't really lived it yet. But to have someone like my dad, to have someone like Coach O'Keefe, to have someone like Coach Ferentz, my strength coach, Coach Doyle, my high school coach, Mike Bell, to have these people where when there's a decision to be made or there's a behavior to bring out, their faces and their ways of talking to you have to be there. They show themselves a little bit. And that's important when you're trying to figure it out, is to have something to lean back on, because it's kind of a fake it till you make it scenario where you really learn who you are going through this sort of trial and error, working your way through all these tough situations.
Well, nobody does it alone. I mean, when you think about like just life as a whole, like if you try and do it all yourself, it's not going to work out very well. I mean, it's going to make everything more challenging. But if you open yourself up to, mentorship, family, a friend, I always tell people, like, mentorship is probably like one of the best parts of life, whether it's personal, professional, because it all comes together. There are things that I've learned from professional mentors in broadcasting that like I've been able to like take into like my personal life. And it's kind of interesting how it all comes full circle. But the one thing, Ricky, that I kind of want to hit on was it sounds like you had a deep belief in yourself, even when you were in your dad's office saying, I don't think I can play college football. There must have been something deeply rooted inside of you somewhere that kept you going.
I've joked with people before. I used this line the other day when I was coaching my son's flag football game, and I tried a trick play and it backfired. And I laughed to our assistant on the coach. I go, I'm just irrationally optimistic. Like, my wife's joked with me about it, and I've always had this about me, optimism. But I do think that an athlete, someone in that competitive arena, like I talked about, Jim Zorn talking about you putting yourself out there for critique, there has to be an irrational optimism. You have to think different and illogical to anything that anybody else would say about you. I mean, I was always, influenced by Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Deion Sanders, these high level athletes, high level men, just high level character and very, very good, lessons to be learned from them. But if you listen to the way they talk and the way that they think, you can't phase them. Like, they think crazy. They think outside the box. They think above and beyond what you could ever imagine. And they don't limit themselves to what you're willing to limit yourself towards. And I think we can all learn from that. We won't get to those levels maybe of a Tom Brady or a Deion Sanders, but shoot, man, try to go there. Try to at least emulate those that have done well, those that have done great. Success leaves a blueprint. And so I guess the only thing I can point back to for myself is that I was irrationally optimistic. I really was. And in those moments, like, look, life's like this. It's ebbs and flows. I tell this to my high school quarterbacks. I'm like, this is a football game in high school. Okay. This is the game. Now, your parents, the student section, that guy on the fence, they can ride that roller coaster, but there's also another roller coaster that's going on inside of that. And it's just a straight line. And you have to get on that train. You have to live on that train where it's just, hey, man, it's going up, it's going down. I don't care. I'm going easy and I'm going right through it. And I'm handling those ups and downs by, when you score a touchdown, yeah, there's a little bit of natural celebration, but you don't let it take you out of a place where you're not grounded. Same thing could be said if you strike adversity and you throw that pick six. Don't let it keep you down in the depths where you're not able to throw that touchdown on the next series. So I think a combination of that, like, hey, man, your dad's telling you there's going to be adversity. You're seeing it. Stay optimistic. That was, I think, the core, the nucleus of fighting through tougher situations and still finding a way to have success. And then also knowing I've got an army around me. I've got good people around me. I've made good decisions in a sense that you put yourself at Iowa. It's a great university. There's great teammates and great coaches. You don't have to do it on your own. Rely on these guys, right? Lean on them a little bit like they're going to lean on you in certain instances. And that's how you build culture and you become a good teammate and all those things start to work out for you.